Okay, welcome back. In this video, we'll cover an introduction to setting up a plan oblique drawing, which is a way of trying to represent three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional medium in a three-dimensional way. We'll move beyond our initial projection systems that allow us to project the relevant information of the size and position of an object around accurately through a system, into expanding that system to allow us to show the object in a more three-dimensional way. And the plan oblique, which is kind of an axonometric type drawing, will be one of our first ways to explore that. I have this out. I'm going to use some information from this to help us get started. Primarily, you're going to need the front or side elevation. Even this elevation here will work because it provides a lot of the information we need as far as heights and thicknesses of things. But I'm going to go with the front elevation and the top elevation as my starting point, and you can always add other ones if you need more information. And the reason this is called an oblique is that we're going to take this view and we're going to kind of look at the object from an oblique angle. So not just the auxiliary where we see it around this way, but from a specific point of view, oblique to the XYZ plane. So one way to do that is to take this top view, which we can call a top plan, and turn it so that it is no longer parallel to kind of my drawing and projection plane. It has now an oblique angle to it here, and use that as our starting point. What we're going to do is basically take that oblique plan and then project from it the three-dimensional information from these sides and kind of construct a three-dimensional cube. So we can recreate this pretty quickly on a new sheet of paper. You're going to be moving on from your previous work with orthographic projection into three-dimensional projection. One thing I want to say here, we have a few options, and you'll see these in Francis Ching's book and in the lecture, is I can do a 45-degree rotation for this. I'll kind of be drawing the three-dimensional cube here. But then this back corner is always hidden behind everything if we wanted to show any background information. In this case, it probably wouldn't matter, but to avoid that, you can also do a 30-60 degree rotation, or pretty much any other rotation, though there are some that are more typical than others, like the 45-45, 30-60. I'll work with a 30-60 here, just to make it nice and easy. So on my page, I'm just going to give myself kind of a place to start, relatively in the center, light line, something to look for, and I'm just giving myself a localized place. And so right here I want to redraw my top view, but rotated 60 degrees. So I can use my 30, 60, 90 triangle for most of this and begin to project out the lines. First I'll just draw some construction lines. And to get us started, the way this works is if I go like that, now I have a 90-degree angle still right here at the corner. So I can still draw my cube in that space and do my measurements there. Let's get out the little ruler to make it fast. Direction. And this is where we don't really have to, again, do a lot of measuring, just the initial setup and a few details here and there, because our tools will handle all of the orientation information for us. Alright, so we already have that basic 2-inch square, and I have to decide kind of which way I want to see this, so I guess we'll go pretty much like that. So I can add in the details for that cutoff corner. I know this is one where this is going to be a weird angle. I'm probably not going to draw it a lot, so it's okay just to kind of connect those two dots. And I'll draw this a little bit idealized, but then we know from this top view that I really just see this shape here, and then these two edges down here. So I can start to give that a little bit more value. So I basically have my top view there. I can add in some dashed lines here, but really this is just for beginning the construction of the cube. Now another thing I'm going to want to do is recreate my right view. I'm going to do it a little bit differently because I need it repositioned. So through projection I could bring it over here, and what I want it to do is line up right along this front edge. And this is an important part about the Plan Oblique, is having a reference edge that's easy to draw to and from. Actually, in this case, with the corner cut off, this is going to be a bit of a virtual edge, where some of it's in play and some of it's not, but that'll be okay. So I'm going to start to see this box developing right here in height, so it fills out this space three-dimensionally. And the Plan Oblique, different from some of the other axonometric drawings, uses true height measurements here, so I can actually measure 2 inches and know that this is where my elevation will be located. Now I could use projection to bring this over and around in town, which would be ideal. I can also bring this face over here, and I want to figure out how to draw those faces in this skewed angle. Right? And we can do it through measurement, but we also want to work with projection. So I'll go ahead and do a little hinging over, up, and around and down to give us that fun experience. And I can just choose one corner of my object as a hinge point if I want to. And I'm just going to draw a few of these lines around. Hopefully you're getting pretty familiar with how this works and finding the hinge style that works for you and in your section. Part of it is functional, and part of it is also an aesthetic choice of what you think develops an interesting composition to the drawing. So I'm going to just give myself some of those there. And then find the vertical tangent of it right here. It should come straight out from that corner because that's my hinge corner. Right? So I can draw that line there. And use this to start to rotate around again to come down. And I won't be able to do that small arc there. That's okay. I can do a reflection for that. Now some of my height information I won't be able to get from here, so again it's a measurement thing. You can also use your previous drawings as kind of overlays and traces to start to set some of that up, but redoing some of the measurements, depending on how complex they are, shouldn't be too hard. But now we pretty much have our setup here. I just want to measure in my 1 inch corner cut there. Alright, so we have this view here, and need to add a couple more segments around it. Again, I don't have those dimensions, but I know they're 1/16, so I can come in and measure them. And I can pick up some of those corners later on with some line weight. But I basically have my information here that I need. Background edges. So we've got those edges exposed, top and bottom overlap like caps. That's just a hard edge. And really, you know, there's a little bit of other detail here depending on how you've made your cube. I'm going to use this to come over and work our way around the cube. Some lines I already know, so I know this front corner, right, comes from there. So I can bring that straight over. You can bring all these edges over. You're just projecting perpendicular and parallel still. I'm bringing down this intersection here so I can see that front edge, because seeing that will have a little edge there. And now I can also bring these down. So because it's a plan oblique, everything projects down or up. You can go either direction, whichever one works. Just because I'm looking at the top view, it makes sense to kind of go down, because then I'm going to project down to the right or the front and the right view. You can also have a lighter bottom view and project up, whichever one works for the thing you're drawing in any particular case. Those lines don't matter. But what we want to be able to do is bring this over to here, where it intersects this main front line that I'm using, comes across, and then I can work back up in that direction. And this drawing gets a little weird looking because things are not true proportions, they're true dimensions. Because they're being relegated by this 30-60 degree angle, they start to appear a bit skewed. But you should be able to start to see these two parts that come down, like straight down, this, but then turn and go from this center reference line back up to the edges, which come straight down. So it's not bending, it's very parallel projected. And we start to see the cap develop into a three-dimensional thickness, whereas this information here is actually not important for the top of the object, but for later views down below. And so we're going to have to start to connect some of these lines from down below. Right? This is on our reference line, so it hits there. But this is further back. Right? We identified it there because it comes across and then goes up this direction, comes across and goes back up this direction. So these points, now I know, can connect from here to here. And they're going to be at a consistent angle, but not an angle relative to our projection system because it's bending in multiple directions from that initial 45. And I can bring down this interior corner here so that I can find that edge, because I know those end up on the same plane, which is this same plane here. And so wherever that intersects right there, I can take back up parallel to this. And this might be where you want to get out your adjustable triangle, because if we're going to draw parallel lines, we need them to be on the same reference plane, right? So you can connect the dots on like one unique line, but otherwise you want to get this out, lock it in, and then find your intersection point. And I'm going to lightly bring it up because I need to fill in a few more lines in here. Right, so now I can start to see this edge of the top of the box going all the way around, just like this edge of the top of the box going all the way around. And now I can see a little better where that line is. And I'll also have a similar line on the other side. I'm getting used to this. It can be adjustable triangle. It can take a little practice because it can work in use different orientations, but you'll figure it out. Just kind of flip it around until you find the one that helps set things up. I want to start to give this a little line weight so stuff starts to pop out for you to see a little better, because I'm getting a lot of overlap, and that might happen. That's okay. Now why don't we go ahead and bring this bottom, like let's see the bottom edge here, which will come across till it hits this reference line, so you know that's a corner. Then it will head back up in these two directions, like the new reoriented projection directions of our 30 and 60 degree angles. Bring this in here, hit that in that direction. And this isn't so different than what you've already been working on in terms of projecting through space, but it just does it now with kind of multiple systems at the same time, because you have this new reoriented axes of projection as well as some of the initial orthographic projection axes. But this little twist here allows us a lot of things. So if I'm going to draw the right side here, I see that it has the bottom edge and the top edge exposed, but this edge is covered. All right, so I can see that inset face there. And why don't I start to... So there we have this side of the box, the right side showing up. Similar if we go look at the front face where we see edges on all sides there. So I'm going to have to draw those in and project them around. Some of that information may not be in here, but the bottom part is, so I can do that first, lightly. There we go. You see that like this side, because it's more turned towards us, is a little bit bigger because the spacing is determined by that obliqueness of the angle, where the spacing here is getting a little tighter, and that flip-flops when we change which side, right? When we're looking this way, this is wider. When we're looking this way, this is narrower. And that's going to be kind of some of the distortion that comes from this way of drawing that you kind of have to get used to seeing. I don't really have anywhere to bring this dimension of the thickness because I haven't drawn it as dashed lines in my top view, but I could do that really quick with the measurement, right? Because I know it's 1/16. There we go. And I'm just going to do a very light line. I don't want a dash line in my drawing. I can come back later and get a good dash line. Careful about those type of things. But now I know this will come to here, and that's where that other edge is. So I can just project it straight down, like that. And now I can see it a bit more. So I'll come in. So I think there, that's pretty much all of my primary elements. Now the drawing's getting a little messy, and so I recommend like your first initial plan, you draw light, there's no line weight. The top view doesn't need any line weight to begin with because some of this information, like these two edges that we see from the top, are actually projected down and seen now more from kind of like a frontish corner view, an oblique view. So I want to be able to erase that or lighten it up quite a lot. I probably drew mine a little too heavy. And I want to come back in and lighten them up. But for now, I think I can come over this with a little bit more line weight to quickly see it in place. But before we do that, let's just walk through what's going on here. Right, we had our top view right here, but it's rotated, in this case, from the vertical 30 degrees, 60 degrees, which still makes a 90-degree angle between those two lines. So we're still working with an orthographic projection system. If you have something that's not orthographic, you can still use this method and just measure things in from a box. Okay, so we're doing that. So we just have a top view, and that top view is projected down with two true dimensions, right? So this is still 2 inches for this box. Then, because we're using true dimensions, we can have our elevation. This is in this case the front view that we brought from this up and around and down to place it and use some of our projection techniques over here. And technically you can put this anywhere and redraw the cube anywhere if you don't want to overlap your drawings. That's okay. I kind of went with an overlap here. It might be cleaner and you don't have to like erase as much stuff for your projection. So you might bring this all the way down and do it down here. So you have a cube floating there. I think Einar can work because some of this is just the setup. If you want to be able to see the top view and organize from it, this drawing does that for you by having it in place and measurable, because this is also 2 inches, this is 2 inches, this is 1 inch, this is 1 inch. All right, that is whatever the resulting dimension is. This is 2 inches, right? Everything here can be measured 2 inches, but it's starting to get a little bit skewed. And kind of as the last thing that I want to do, I'll take my heavier pencil and just give a little bit of line weight to it to make it stand out from some of the air. So one way in working with these 3D views, the oblique, axonometric, isometric, and successive auxiliary, to make the drawing have a little bit more intensity, is to start to develop a profile line to the drawing. And this is setting it off from its background by highlighting or darkening the outer profile with the heaviest or heavier line weight. And you don't want to go too heavy on it because it can really flatten the drawing too. So it's a kind of a balance. It's just a little bit heavier than some of the other stuff in the drawing, so that it makes it kind of pop out as its own object from the page. That doesn't mean that everything else is flat. You still need to kind of work your way through the rest of the object to give it good line weight definition. So right now I'm developing the profile line. After that, I'll have to work internally and think about the visual relationships between those internal lines to make sure we don't lose information and depth. All right, this is the outline, in a sense, the profile of the cube relative to this page, so it's popping this object off. But that also has really normalized or equalized visually all the line weights inside. So I want to come back and give them a little bit more definition as well, so they can be balanced with this heavy profile line. And you can start to think about, what are we really seeing, right? This top view really stands out because it's kind of a cap to the object. So I might want to bring those lines up a little bit in value so I can really see that. Not quite as heavy as the profile. All right, so now I've just focused on that top plane there standing out, but I'm going to leave the in-between lines here, right, where I'm just gluing 2 pieces of material together. I'm going to leave those a bit lighter. I would actually probably like them even lighter than this, but this is where I'm at, so I can go darker in other places, because those are kind of more minor to the object, right? This is still an edge line where the thing goes into space, and these are just edges between materials where glue is kind of trying to mitigate it. So I might then also think about that same strategy of giving this corner a bit more intensity, and this edge of this face here, and maybe this edge of this face here, to make this kind of centralized thing stand out a little bit. All right, so now that shape is starting to stand out, and this front edge a little bit as well. Some of the background stuff is now kind of sinking into the background. So one thing I didn't draw was some of the background that I could see through this hole here. So why don't I bring that into the drawing really quick. So let's very lightly project down that back edge, which we have to consider our thickness of material. And so I don't have that in here on both sides yet. So I'll give myself a little 1/16 dimension there. And then we can bring these back corners across, but again, I have to consider where my dimension is. So there's an intersection there. Back in. And on this one, I need a little bit of a measurement, which I could bring around from the top, from this light line here. Those aren't really part of my drawing, they're just light construction lines. And if all has gone well, they should meet pretty close to the same spot. Should be exactly in the same spot. All the measurements are going well. All right, so what we find out is that we really don't see very much of it because I have this here intersecting right there in those back planes, so only really would see this line right here. And that's just a very light line back there in the background of the cube when you see the bottom face on the interior. A few more things I might want to do is just give a little bit more value to this inner edge here to make the hole stand out. Again, I'm doing line weight as long as I'm careful. I can use my triangles as ways to go over it. But that's it. That gives us basically all the information. You're going to start to need all your tools. I didn't really need this 45 that much. Sometimes it's useful for verticals, but you're adjustable and you're 30-60. If you choose to do a 45 orientation instead of a 30-60, or you can use this to do any other orientation that you want to help show or preference a side, right? This way, preference more the right side than the front. So this is still the front, the right, and the top of the object, and we get kind of this distorted thing. And you want to practice this a lot because you can start to do a lot of other interesting things with this. You can draw your section planes into it, and then start to cut pieces off and move them around the page. Maybe that's something we can really quickly explore. Let's do a super simple section. I know from my previous drawing that I had sections somewhere around here. And from that, we can start to play with our triangles for this. Just to make sure I draw my tick marks. And so if I have a section cut in the top view going across like this, looking that way, I could take and project some of this straight down. And some of this, I know where that goes. Then over here, I have to figure out where that is on this object, which I can project down, but I won't be able to see it, but I can find out where it intersects this main corner and start to work around the box. If that's a vertical section. It could also be a good opportunity to do an oblique section where this plane that we're cutting with is not moving straight down, but like cutting through the object at an angle. And part of the way to do that is just to define this line that intersects the top and another line that intersects the bottom in a different place. So rather than straight down, if I was just going straight down, it would intersect the bottom around there. I'm going to have it intersect out here in space somewhere. I'm going to just draw a light line. And then to figure out where that is, right, really we're going to need our back corner there. Right around there. So I know that back edge, wherever that line intersects it, right there. Will also intersect here. And I can bring my tick mark. So these are easier to see. I can bring that down at the same angle as this. So I'll use my adjustable triangle to figure out this angle. And that's something you could determine beforehand or just see what looks interesting and then lock it in. And we'll use that to help us draw this. And that means that this section plane would be there, and this one will be here. So you'll see this on the example, but there's basically now a plane cutting through this object right here, slicing through it in space, and I can start to use that and my adjustable triangle to project that all around this three-dimensional view. All right, so that's going to hit right there, and since this is going on a nice parallel trajectory, there. This one's touching the top, so it's going right there. But it will come down at this angle from this corner. And then we'll have some background. So hopefully you can kind of see where this is happening here. In a sense, I'm going to be cutting. You can add a little bit more to this. Start to see it in material dimensions. So there's the outer dimension of my material cut. You should remember that from the section. And I've sliced this thing, kind of roughly in half at this oblique angle. You could do a double oblique or single, vertical, horizontal, kind of plan cut, anything there. You're going to do multiples of these, bringing them from before, and then we can start to pull this off. So this projection system allows me to remove this piece along the same relative axes that I've set up. And it might make sense in this case to pull this up, but I don't have any more paper so that we could see some of that inside. So instead we'll just pull this down. And I don't have to do a lot of measuring, I can just project things. I'm just going to project things that I'm cutting here. Now this line I know is 1 inch up, so I'm just going to add a light construction line and come back, and that could be measured or you could bring it around. Probably will make sense to go ahead and measure since I didn't know where this was at on my drawing. We have 1 and 9/16, 1 inch and 9/16. That's giving me the rough baseline. Now I'm going to use my adjustable triangle again to start to bring this angle, this cutting angle, into play. Put that over there, and on that edge. That's, I think, everything we have there, right? It's just the cut off part from this very now physical section cutting act. There we have this face here. We have this whole face showing, so we didn't cut it. We have just this little bit of the top showing there. And I would be able to see one of these lines back there where that's cut. Able to be brought over here. And it'll just be right there in the background. And so then final steps would be to go ahead and profile that and make that stand out. And then you can look at scaling it by defining an origin point, taking this dimension of x and making a dimension of x times 2 or 1.5 or 0.5 or anything like that, and following that through with every other dimension. So you start to get this object that now takes on much more space. You might start to get some overlaps and intersections, and that can be interesting to explore. All right, thank you. See you next time.